Our heroes start this session in Emberwood. They decide that they don't trust River or the Amethyst Academy and their unknown, undisclosed experiments. Giant crystal they found in the Rat's Nest Tower. Instead, they decide to sell it to the Silver Order, which they know will destroy it. Before they leave, Harmon passes Morgan a small bag of delirium found in the pharmacy on their trek into the city last time. He suggests to her to sell this on her own. He has been with her for a long time. He knows she needs money. He doesn't know why she needs money, but he knows she needs it. So he discreetly passes that leftover delirium to sell on her own. At the chapel, they take the crystal and mention that River offered them a lot more money for it. Flamekeeper Hannah cannot give them that much, but she does give them a little bit more for all of their work. She destroys the crystal and the group leaves. So Morgan does stay behind. She ends up selling her own bag of crystals, which, raises an eyebrow too, but accepts nonetheless. The rest of the group, while Morgan is selling crystals, make their way back to the Skull and Bone Tavern, where Harmon decides this is an excellent time to flaunt his recent kill. He walks into the tavern and immediately buys a round for everyone. The tavern patrons throw up a cheer, but then ask, what is this for? Of course, now with the group's attention, he starts winding his tale about a large horde of rats and a large, crazy rat prince and his fearsome battle. They nearly killed him twice. He motions to Zelda, who uses minor illusion to show a picture of the rat prince above a table. Delirium teeth in its shiny crown. At the peak of his story, Harmon slams the head through the minor illusion down onto the table, triggering Zelda to dispel the minor illusion. Now, the tavern is chattering away at this and whispering about how difficult the kill must have been and really getting into his storytelling. A lone voice calls up above the crowd. Of course, he did it with a stolen weapon. Ain't much of a heroic move, if you ask me. Harmon recognizes the voice and narrows it down to the voice of an old rival, Talon Soulsfrost. Harmon is in possession of the Soulsfrost family heirloom, the Soul Piercer, his rapier. Harmon says that he won the sword fair and square in a game of cards. Talon says fair and square must mean something different when you're a cheater. Zelda tries to help by smacking him on the head. This immediately makes him aggressive, and the barkeep steps up, telling them to take it outside. As they do so, Harmon and Noct notice that they are quietly being surrounded by other thieves or bandits of some sort, possibly to back up Talon. Harmon says he wants to settle this the old-fashioned way, with another game. Talon agrees, but says he will determine the game, and it will be a game of dice. They move to play, and Harmon quietly asks Zelda to make an illusion so that he loses. He doesn't want to pick a fight when they are surrounded. Unfortunately, Talon catches Zelda cheating and flies into a rage. It's at this point that our dear barbarian friend Morgan reaches the tavern. She very quickly assesses the situation. She snatches Soul Piercer from Harmon and offers it to Talon in exchange for his own rapier so that her roguish friend can still fight. He's suspicious, but agrees. Morgan then says, let's return to the tavern for ale, and buys them all a drink. Talon gets drunk and reveals that he followed Harmon here for a long ways trying to get his sword back, but also figured it was probably in better hands. The group decides to return to their cabin and do a long rest. Before they do this, Noct goes back to the chapel and visits Flamekeeper Hannah. He asks her if she has any information on helping to stop this contamination. And they work together for a couple hours, learning bits and pieces of spells to neutralize the contamination. Though he doesn't learn anything that he can directly use yet. It's just the early stages gathering of knowledge. And he starts forming this rapport with Flamekeeper Hannah. He returns to the cabin and the group long rests before setting off in the morning for the Chapel of St. Brenna. A reminder, an adventuring party recently returned with evidence that St. Brenna was interred in the Chapel of St. Brenna, surprise, and with her, the scepter of St. Vitruvio is kept safe. Rival group argued over which faction to take this information to, and thus ended with them disbanding and delivering the news to 3 different groups. The Silver Order is the one that has tasked our party with finding the scepter of St. Vitruvio before the other factions and heathens get their hands on it. The party sets off for Drakkenheim. On the way, however, they encounter a manticore, which swoops down from the sky and attempts to fly off with Zelda. Zelda manages to command the creature to drop her, which does result in some fall damage, but the rest of the party pounces, literally as Delilah transforms into a panther to actually pounce. Morgan throws Harmon onto the roof after their foe, and he ends up finishing it off. It slides down to the ground, landing on Morgan. They do remove the creature before they harvest parts out of it. They take a few of its spikes for use as ammo, a couple of the feathers just for ornamentation, and a few of the teeth, which they can use as caltrops. Finally, they make their way to the chapel. Like everything else in the city, it's in complete ruins. Everything seems colorless and run down. One tower has been completely collapsed in, but instead of going in through the chapel main doors, they hear a commotion kind of off to the right, and they move towards that. As they approach, they hear, "Oi, don't touch that. I'm in charge here and I ain't getting blown to shreds." Here they found some thieves who have claimed to have found the scepter, but they also claim it's a trap. Harmon approaches and says, "Well, I'll get it out." He convinces the thieves to all step back, and he approaches this statue. This very sad looking statue of a woman holding the rods at first glance does not seem trapped by Harmon. He continues to take a couple steps forward, checking for traps as he goes. It's at this point where, as Harmon approaches the statue, that Zelda notices one of the bandits drop a rolled up piece of parchment. She moves to pick it up stealthily, but Nock catches her at that very high passive perception, sees that she stows it away quickly. Harmon proceeds to try and check for traps every 5 feet as he approaches the statue, which is really funny since it's not trapped at all. He then wraps a rope around the rod, steps back, and attempts to use the rope to pull it out. As he does so, it doesn't budge at all, not even a little bit, which is strange since the scepter did seem like it wasn't directly attached to the statue's hands. Harmon goes back to the statue and examines the rod further and finds a small button on the side of the rod. He pushes it, and the rod slides right out of the statue's hands. He reveals this to the bandits that it's not the scepter they were looking for. But the lead thief, this man who's covered in horrific burns, he steps back up and demands that he found that rod first, and therefore it belongs to him to return with to the Queen's men. Morgan tries to shut that down with a very stern look. And then there's a thaumaturgy effect from Zelda helping her with this intimidation check. This makes some of the bandits immediately turn tail and start to leave. Not the leader Rorsch. Delilah decides that there's another solution to this problem. She casts infestation, and suddenly he's crawling with bugs, and he starts running from them, causing the rest of the bandits to book it out of the crematory garden. Swarm of locusts follow the lead bandit for a few feet until they eventually disappear. Noct turns his attention to the gardens. Being of the Sacred Flame, he recognizes this as a crematory garden and begins walking the perimeter, checking for anything out of the ordinary. This happens while Harmon asks Morgan to try pushing the statue. He believes that now that the statue is no longer being held in place with this immovable rod, that it might be pushable to reveal a door. Morgan attempts to push the statue, rolls poorly, and it does not move at all. Just as she goes to try again, Noct speaks up as he walks around to the rear of the statue and finds a very long closed hatch with a chain and lock. Harmon goes, "Oh." He moves to the back of the statue and tries to pick the lock, instead breaking a lock pick in the process. But Morgan says it's no problem and very easily chops the chain in two, releasing and opening the door. This allows the group to enter the Undercroft. They can tell that no one has been here in a very long time. The crypts are dark, damp, musty, no sign of footprints, not even right outside the door outside of their own footprints. So they move forward a little bit and find a room with a fountain, as well as a series of very intricate murals. With Noct's history in religion, he relays to the group that this is a purification fountain, that the mural depicts the acts of a deceased body being prepared for burial. They gather some of the holy water from the fountain, and they also find a few leftover scrolls and potions of healing on a shelf nearby. They make it to the next chamber, and here they find a device set into the floor with a wedge shape similar to the bottom of their immovable rod. They put the rod in the slot and pull the lever. To the right, possibly a little bit lower, they hear the sound of a gate or something being opened up. When they let go of the rod, it slowly starts to close until they push the button, locking that gate open. They realize they have to keep this rod here and engaged, keep the door open, and Harmon is a little nervous about that. He doesn't want someone to come up behind them and shut the gate, trapping them in the crypts. He decides to use his disguise kit and some of the ruined blocks and dirt to hide the lever and kind of blend it in with the surrounding. He makes this winch system kind of look like a pile of rubble. They then climb the stairs down. The gate in the next room is indeed open. Around its frame are these faint depictions of angels and saints laid to rest, and they can read the inscription that says, "Compassion and temperance sustain the light. Greed and hatred bring darkness." Just inside the door, they see several corpses on stone slabs, each surrounded by multiple candles, all lit. And that is where we ended our session. If you like what you're watching, consider supporting me on Patreon, the best way to support creators on YouTube. You can get behind the scenes, plus you can get ad-free versions of my videos. Also, live streams, there's shop discounts, hopefully some paper products coming out, definitely a magazine in the works. There's lots of stuff there. Link in the description. Here's the stuff I could have done better. I think I mentioned this in the past. I can definitely do better with my NPCs. In this case, I did have some backstory for Rorsch. Not backstory, but like a personality for him. But I didn't lean into that because I forgot I had created it, which is just a result of not having played for 2 months when we started the session. In particular, I just need like a short thing that describes their personality just to trigger that. And I think that would just help me roleplay better. I don't want to flesh out every NPC. And I do know that the book itself has some faction member examples that give like brief descriptions. I could use those, but then I have to like literally go to those sections and pull them out. I just didn't do that. But even just leaning into the description a little bit more would probably help. I think I just need to make it more out there, a little stronger than I've been doing. As a player, I'm really not good at acting or voices or anything like that, really. As a player, I typically lean into describing like facial expressions, demeanor, and that kind of stuff pretty well. Granted, as a player, you have a little bit more time to think those things through. Explaining expressions and demeanor can tell the story without telling the story. Give you a description that you can interpret yourself. And I think I need to implement that from a GM perspective more. I don't think they honestly notice, but I think I could do better. So I'm going to attempt to do that. I think the reason though I do well with that as a player is, again, I also allow myself to pause as a player, which I don't always allow myself to do as a GM, which is really dumb. I'm allowed to stop and think too. I think it's just harder because there are multiple people that you're trying to pay attention to at one time, and it makes it harder to think on the fly. I need to allow myself time to pause more. The winch puzzle absolutely confused me until I was actually describing it to them. I don't know why, but reading it in the book, like it sounded way more complicated than it was. And then once we started actually doing it, I was like, oh, this is how it works. Probably would have been solved if I watched the Dungeon Dude's actual play or like other people's plays of Drakkenheim, but I didn't. So we did continue to use the timer. Still very bad at actually making people stop and cutting them off. Combat is still a slog, but it is way better than it was. I also think that sometimes there are issues that you just have to talk through with your player because they don't know what the ruling should be. But I do think they're still paying attention more. They're actually more prepared. I am going to try to be a little bit more strict with it, but I'm going to get a different timer because this timer also only does a minute. And I think a minute is not quite enough, especially if I want them to describe what they do, give it a little bit more role play aspect. It takes a little bit of time to think about that and implement that. I think maybe 2 minutes would be a better timer. I bought a new timer and we'll probably use that next session if it arrives on time. So my preparation for the next session was extensive because I'm really leaning into that role play. And after the chapel, I have no idea where they're going because it is so open world. But I also want to drop hints on pretty much every little tiny quest they could possibly do and lead them into that. I also want to do some things with backstory. So I prepared a lot. The biggest thing I wanted to do though was bring in those players' side quests, their personal quests, and backgrounds. Since now they have a firm understanding of how the city works, of what to expect. The plan is that as they leave the chapel, of course they will run into the Falling Flame people, their strike team, and as long as they keep certain things hidden, that shouldn't be an issue. It could be pretty easy to avoid. Otherwise, they might have a fight there. Who knows? Then when they leave the chapel area and are still in the city, I will actually have an encounter with a group of rival adventurers at some point. I've essentially created a more extreme version of their characters as a group. And I hope to use this rival group throughout the rest of the campaign to push them in certain directions when I need to, or to just change things up, make things higher stakes, like they have to go into buildings and plunder them before other people there. Maybe they'll get there first. I want there to be more stakes. So that's what this group is for. Here, I'm gonna describe what these people, what these rival adventurers are. I would love assistance in naming this rival group. Our group of heroes does not have a name, but I want the rival adventurers to have a party name that's slowly gaining rapport, okay? 'Cause I want competition. Here's the gist of the characters I have created. I use a resource with this, which was $10 on DM's Guild. I'll drop a link down below for anybody who's interested. It essentially takes some of the monster stats and some class-based stuff to allow you to make NPCs that are a little bit closer to characters without making full-fledged characters, because you don't need a full-fledged character for an NPC like this. But here they are. Peach. This is anti-Zelda, if you will, because if she can name her character Princess Zelda as an attempt to curry favor with me, because, you know, I obviously really enjoy The Legend of Zelda. This is Princess Peach then, you know? She's a pink tiefling sorcerer. She has very similar spells to Zelda, like Color Spray, Fog Cloud. Also has a claim to the throne, but she is much louder about it than Zelda, claiming that she will use her wish to change the agreement of the Edicts of Lumen to allow anyone with magical ability to inherit noble titles and thrones, as they were meant to, she believes. Next, we've got Dis, which is anti-Harmon, because you get it, like Harmon, short for maybe harmony, Dis, short for dissonance. Dis will be a show-offy, swashbuckling thief, very similar to our Harmon, but she will also gain the Souls Piercer and a drunken vet from Talon. The Souls Piercer will suddenly be more powerful than they have seen before. This is partially because the plan for Souls Piercer was to make it more powerful over time for Harmon. So this is my way of kind of being like, look what you lost, but giving him the opportunity to steal it back. There's Lily. This is Delilah's counterpart. She is druid-esque in her abilities, but she is so into the way of the old gods that she wishes harm to anybody who would even think to follow the sacred flame, which means she will be actively trying to harm Noct, who wears a symbol of his deity and is very clearly a sacred flame member. Stella is our Twilight cleric. So she doesn't follow the sacred flame because her companion would kill her, but she does fold an old goddess of the sky, Lunaris. She is beautiful, she is fierce, but she's very good at keeping her team alive and will be giving everybody on the team advantage on initiative roll, because I'm mean. Then there's Morris, a large, bulky fellow who's always drunk. As opposed to Morgan's Path of the Glacier build, he has the Aura of the Tundra. This is a crazy storm that encircles him. Being drunk will also give him Drunken Luck, which I kind of changed from the monk build to allow him to once per day negate disadvantage on an ability check or saving throw. Can stand from prone using 5 feet of movement instead of half his movement, but only while he's drunk. If anyone has a group name idea for them, let me know. Regardless, this group of rival adventurers will continue to attack the party until one of their own is downed, at which point they will essentially beg for mercy and try to help their companion and back out. They will say they only really took the contract for money, not really that important to them. If pressed, the contract is with the Jackal, who is currently in charge of Morgan's debt. He has placed a 2,000 gold piece bounty on her head. It's also possible that in this battle, Morgan could be captured here. Since the group is going to be pretty injured by the end of this, I think they will knock her out and take her north of the city, and this will mean that the group will be able to follow her to Eckerman Mill. This will be where they could encounter the Jackal's right-hand man, Butch. At the mill, they may or may not see the rival group accepting the payment and then bouncing. And this could offer our heroes an opportunity for a stealth mission or not. I don't know. I haven't actually created this part of the thing yet because it'll take us a while to get there. That's kind of the loose plans. Other things I definitely prepared are Camp Dawn. Since I did not prepare Shepherd's Gate very well, I really looked into Camp Dawn. I predict they handle the adventurers pretty well. Again, they only have to knock one down and then they'll move on. So once they do that and gain that information, they'll probably head to Camp Dawn to turn in the scepter. I wanted just a good understanding of the camp makeup, what Ophelia Reed will offer them, and what she would be willing she would be looking to accomplish next. I also prepared the rewards for the quest. She will offer them to Noct since he is the Sacred Flame representative of the group. He will get to choose one. I used some magic items from the Griffin Saddlebag 2, which I kickstarted a while back, and I got these really cool cards that I could use. They also have the opportunity to gather a +1 weapon from the crypts that could go to Morgan, but who knows if they'll actually follow up on that. But at this point, I'm going to start giving them magical weapons because they will be leveling up to level 4 at the when they turn in this quest. Ophelia will also take this opportunity to introduce them to a new quest, leading them to hopefully investigating some dwarves in the city. They will also be offered a place to rest here, or they could rest back in town. This will also offer me an opportunity to introduce an updated vision for Delilah, hopefully leaking a little bit of information about the crater. I, of course, looked ahead at Reed Manor as well. I think the group will head back to town at some point, and when they do, Ansem and Petra will probably seek them out. Then this other one, I prepared this, but there's no way we're gonna hit all of these things. But I was having a hard time figuring out Noct's quest. He's supposed to, at some point, go into the sewers to learn more about the contamination, but I couldn't find anything in the book that talked about what he could find in the sewers or anything that kind of hinted at his personal quest. Homebrewing a bit here. Of course, feel free, someone to tell me if I missed it in the book or if they did something specific in the Dungeon Dudes campaign. I'm not going to be watching that. The general plan, I think, is he's already started building a rapport with Flamekeeper Hannah. So I'm going to have her ask him to fetch a sample of the water for her studies on the contamination. She thinks she's on the brink of figuring out a new spell, a version of Purge Contamination that works on delirium, but she needs something contaminated to test it on, and she refuses to test her magic on a living soul or a living being. She'd be no worse than the Academy at that point. So she believes water in the sewers is probably the most contaminated and the best for this experiment. When they get into the sewers, we can drop the hint about the Duchess and all the stuff in the cistern. She will also, at this point, I think, mention the lack of potions as well and supplies lately, which will lead to higher and higher pricing for purging contamination. I want someone to grow a tentacle arm. If they are in town, I'll also try to have Blackjack Mill approach Harmon. I don't know how that will go, honestly, because he seems standoffish about the Queen's Men. If he allows for a conversation, Blackjack Mel will drop hints about the Black Ivory Inn. If not, they might hear rumors in town. There's other ways to drop that one. But I do want to hint on all of these things after they leave the chapel. So I was trying to prepare a lot of these in case, because they could literally go in any direction, which is the beauty about this campaign, I think, but it makes a little bit more work for me. And typically I notice that I over prepare and I typically have things I prepare for multiple sessions and then end up having to change those things around a little bit. But having already prepared certain sections allows me to easily pivot when I'm in the DM seat. So that way, if they decide, okay, we don't want to follow this, let's go to the sewers, I already have a general sense of what could happen there and I could move that in. And then I can relink everything else since I have a pretty good understanding of what happens in those quest lines. I don't want to railroad them. I do want to provide the opportunity to make decisions and affect the world. And depending on how they do certain things, we could make the Duchess mad. We could, if they kill all the rival adventurers, that would be sad, but maybe then the bounty increases. Lots of things can happen. And so I'm kind of excited to see where they go with all of this. But essentially, I'll be dropping a lot of quest hints and then struggling to predict which way they will go. I finally caught up where we are. We have another session though in 3 days. So I will see you guys in the next one. And hopefully we're gonna slow down a little bit. It'll be every other Monday after this point, hopefully, if I did it right. But I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.